Right. Okay. So let's talk about purity, which is one of the strongest and most pervasive invisible contracts that women are governed by across multiple cultures, and across society in general. A woman's purity is often deemed to be the most important, special thing that she can possibly ever possess, and she must guard it with her life, of course. Otherwise, her intrinsic value depreciates apparently as fast as the value of a brand new car when it's taken off the car lot. So, you know, it's a really interesting invisible contract to discuss. I grew up in a religion whereby those same messages around purity are very strong. At least they were when I was growing up in the 90s and the 2000s. And of course, what we're really talking about quite often is virginity itself, which is, again, something that is fetishized all over the world. Even men who are not virgins themselves, especially a lot of men inside religions, men who have converted into religions after being a scallywag, they desire a virgin wife. They apparently value having a wife who was a virgin, and there's all sorts of sometimes dark, twisted reasons as to why that is. And so I do get this question a lot. I have talked about virginity a few times actually over on TikTok, and it's always really interesting to see the responses. Often from women, actually, when I talk about how purity and virginity is an invisible contract and the ways that that contract plays out, as it were, in our lives as women. And, on that point around fetishization and, how dangerous this can be for women, there are places in the world where it is believed that virgin girls are a cure to certain illnesses. And so there will be men who have things like HIV, who have unprotected sex with young virgin girls. Obviously, we know that this is a wild, inaccurate, completely false belief that has absolutely no, really, it's immoral, but it also has no scientific and medical backing to be true. But this is the kind of thing that these cultures and men in those cultures lean on. In fact, we see that there are cultures where girls will be unalived, as they say, if it's even suspected that her honor has indeed been soiled. And so, and nowadays they can film themselves dancing in the streets after taking a young woman's life, okay? Just because, often not by her own admission, mind you, apparently her virginity has been, taken away. Not to mention the fact that when you think about practices that happened all over the world, whereby on a wedding night, there would be evidence would be sought that the hymen had been broken. I mean, it's so distasteful, undignified, and uncouth, and quite frankly, very unpleasant for a woman in particular to have to experience that, really and truly. And when you even think about the mere process of that kind of intercourse, there's something barbaric about that, because specifically blood is being looked for. That is the indication or sign that this woman has indeed remained pure at the point of marriage. When we really think about these things, and I know people often really do push back when I talk about these things because it is uncomfortable, but actually it is a symptom or a reflection of patriarchal societies, and it's definitely a reflection of misogyny and the harm that that causes to women. And this is why I talk about virginity in particular, as I say, having come from a background where that, of course, is what is encouraged. Now, what I will say is that, of course, when you look at most holy texts, specifically Abrahamic religions, the reality is when virginity or chasteness and purity is discussed, it is genderless. However, in practice, so remember, we're always talking about these invisible contracts, which are the gap between what is taught to women and what is actually happening. And in this gap, what we see is that it's only girls and women who are expected to remain chaste and pure and virginal until, of course, they marry a man. Men, on the other hand, are actually allowed, enabled, encouraged, and often actually a lack of sexual discipline and promiscuity is facilitated and rewarded socially quite often in men. And it's funny, when we even think about the word promiscuity, it's usually, when people use the word, they are usually referring to women. Let us be clear here. Right? We don't usually use the word promiscuous when describing a man's sexual habits and lifestyle. So this word has very much become gendered, although I do like to acknowledge, of course, that a lot of these holy texts do not gender purity, so to speak. And so, when you think about the trajectory that girls and women are put on, is that, their virginity must be protected, their purity must be guarded and protected at all costs while they are living in the family home, while they are under the authority of a father. And then, of course, the idea is that they are chosen and selected or betrothed, depending on the culture and time we're talking about, to a man. They get married, and then they will consummate said marriage. They will have to, in some cultures, provide some evidence of their virginity in terms of their wedding night. Okay, and so that's the trajectory that women are often on. Now, in the meantime, of course, there are men who do have sex before marriage, men who are having sex casually. And I appreciate the fact that we live in a world, of course, where casual sex and premarital sex, as those in religions would put it, is quite commonplace and typical. But my point is, men are allowed to explore their sexuality. And of course, they, have these 180s, whether they've reverted to a religion or not, and suddenly they want a virgin wife. They want a woman who said no to the man that they were. Right? That's what they're looking for. And my attitude, especially when I was a part of my former religion, is that there is no man that can tell me that he expects me to be a virgin when he is not. And quite frankly, there is no atonement he can possibly, say that he's been through, that after he's been a scallywag, he therefore deserves a virgin wife. Now, that's my point. And when I speak to a lot of young women who ask me, what my thoughts are on this, I'm like, go for like for like. If your virginity and purity is important to you, and I'm going to come on to that in a minute because it belongs to you, it's not a commodity that is up for sale. But, if it's important to you and you have held yourself to a standard that you say reflects these deep inner core values, some of which may be religious, may not be religious, it will be interesting to see if you drop your standards when it comes to, assessing a partner or a husband. Because sometimes it's very interesting, because when men are talking more generally about female sexuality and, whether women respect themselves, okay, and whether women, preserve themselves, they often cannot match you in that kind of way. And I think that actually sometimes, just depends if I'm feeling, if I'm in the mood sometimes, I'll let a man know, actually, you're not good enough for me. Because I don't have these values, I didn't have those values, so that I can end up with a man who did not even try, quite frankly, who did not even try to keep said values. And also, as I say, these people, these men in particular, who revert back into religions and then hold these women up to a standard that they cannot match. Okay, that they cannot match. And there's a lot of men who revert to religions who struggle with sexual discipline. They struggle with celibacy, and they still have the gumption to be judging women who are really in the same room as them. And then what happens is these, virgin girls that they meet in these religions, these churches, the congregations, and a lot of the time these virgin girls have been waiting for a dream man to come along. They have also drank the Kool-Aid about, the experience that men apparently bring to sex and so forth. And so the same standard they've held themselves to, they're not actually expecting a man to. So it's really important, and I understand that these might seem to be radical views, but as far as I'm concerned, especially for young women who have kept certain, they 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 have certain core values, and they have kept to those. You know, do not drop your standard for a man, because the truth of the matter is, the man that fetishizes and specifically desires a virgin woman when he is not one, you have to look at his overall character, because that is an entitlement. People can want what they want, but when you are disrespectful to women, the same types of women you were sleeping with but for a year ago, a few years ago, and before, and now you are supposedly hailing up this, do not get bamboozled, okay, into thinking that that is a reflection of his character, because if he hasn't kept that lifestyle himself, there's the evidence. But equally, that is not a person that you really want to be chosen by. If that is his focus and obsession, and like I say, he hasn't been able to follow through with that himself. And I was a stickler for that when I was still in my old religion. I've lived the life of abstinence, been there, done that, well into the adult years. And so, I know what I'm talking about. And one thing as well, I always discourage young girls from doing is, do not buy into the purity and social hierarchy that systems of power want you to believe in, and that often includes your own religion. So do not participate in looking down on women who may not be virgins, women who may have chosen for whatever reason to have premarital sex, because what the system is trying to get you to do obviously is punch downwards, okay? And what it doesn't tell you, which is why it's so important we talk about these things, is that it will not treat you better. Purity and virginity does not protect you as a woman from disrespect. It doesn't protect you from liberty, exploitation, disappointment, frustration. Okay, one thing that is true, especially if you are around women who have remained virgins until marriage, that does not guarantee a happy marriage. It does not guarantee a peaceful marriage. It does not guarantee pleasurable sex for you. It might be great for him and his ego, but it doesn't guarantee pleasurable sex for you. And it's so important to understand this, okay? Purity and virginity, for example, both of which are constructs, quite frankly, if it's important to you, that is okay. It has to be important to you. And if you feel that it's important in terms of your faith and your relationship with a higher power, with a deity, that is also okay. It belongs to you. It is your body. You get to choose what to do with it. So in no way am I saying that you should not wait till marriage if that is something that you desire to do. What I'm saying is that it is not an insurance, it is not a protection, it is not a guarantee. Because I can tell you, having had plenty of friends who abstained until marriage, that their marriages, some of them, are just as dysfunctional as anybody else's. There's toxicity sometimes, there's chaos sometimes. And one thing that is true is that their husband doesn't think to himself, oh, let me not give her the silent treatment because she was a virgin when I met her. Let me not cheat on her because she was a virgin when I met her. Let me not abuse her physically and emotionally because she was a virgin when I met her. You see, that wears off very quickly because, quite frankly, unless that man can match you in terms of morality, as it were, okay, it is just ego. It's just ego. It might make him feel better to think that he had a virgin wife, but like I say, it does not translate into you being cherished and honored and respected. That is not how it works. And so that is an invisible contract. It's an outright lie. It only, if you keep it for yourself, it only means something to you, and of course the deity if it is faith related. I know there's many people who abstain for non-religious, non-faith reasons, but it's really important to understand the facts here, okay, of it doesn't guarantee that men will respect you. And this is also a key part. There is nothing you can do to earn a man's respect. It is a choice. It is always a choice for a man to choose to respect you, to dignify you, to honor you, to cherish you, right? Those are the things that you're taught. That's part of the fairy tale. All right. That is always a choice. Like I say, you can look around. There are women who did all the things. They were the good girl. They were the good woman. They get into the marriage. They get the ring. Okay, they are being submissive. They are being the wife, that the Proverbs 31 wife, and still it is not enough. It does not guarantee respect. You cannot earn a man's respect. There is nothing you can say, do, or wear, not say, that guarantees that that man will see you as a human being, that he will respect you. Okay, that is about character, and he either has that character before you or not. Because I can tell you from experience, my virginity and purity did not save me. It did not save me from mistreatment, exploitation, and abuse from men. And I am but one of millions of women who will tell you the exact same thing. And so it's really important for you to understand that your virginity belongs to you, first and foremost. And it does not guarantee you anything in relation to men. Yeah, in relation to men. There is definitely something to be said about having a core value and following through on that. Absolutely. But also don't make it your identity and personality, because it really isn't that. Okay, it's but one part of your life. You are not your virginity. There's so much more to you as a human being beyond whether or not your vagina has actually been entered. Because to be quite clear, that's what we're really talking about here. That's what we are talking about. Okay, because it's not the same and not really even related to pleasurable sex. It's not even related to your sexuality. There are individuals who are asexual, for example. There are individuals who have never had sex. Okay, there are individuals. It really doesn't even really speak to sexuality, much less sexual pleasure. It's really important. And you know what? The other thing that I know, again from experience and having had many of these types of conversations as I was growing up, quite often there would be Christian men who would say things like they want to be with a virgin woman because they want to teach her. Okay? You have to listen carefully to these kinds of things and understand what that means, because quite frankly, a lot of the time they're purely thinking about their own pleasure, and it is ego. Because what they're not saying is, I want you to feel safe, feel loved, feel comfortable, and experience pleasure. No, they just simply want the ego boost of being the first man. And if you're married and you follow the rules, all goes well, the only man. That is about them. That is not about you. And often they are probably going to drop off some very lazy, lazy sexual experiences for you, because they're not going to be prioritizing your pleasure at all. Okay, a man that thinks like that is not a man really you want to be sharing your body with. And do remember that. With all this talk about how a woman, her most important precious gift, some cultures really peddle that thought that your most precious gift as a woman is indeed your virginity. You are the one who is choosing to share your body if that's what you want to do. Your body belongs to you. Okay, you have a right to bodily autonomy. Even in marriage, you have a right to bodily autonomy. Okay, it's not a free for all. Okay, it's not a ping pong machine, a public ping pong machine. No. Okay, it is your body. It is, and if you choose to share it, you have every right to decide the terms on which you choose to share it. And I would suggest that pleasure should be at the top of your list. Your body is not there to be used by somebody else. Your body is not there to be used by somebody else. So those are just some of the things. It was a question that comes through many times around purity, around virginity. And like I say, a lot of the times, the main people who push back on, the perspective I have on purity and virginity as an invisible contract governing women's lives, it is young girls, it's women, because often we are the ones who are taught that these things are true. And so your identity can really become attached to those beliefs, right? And in a fairy tale world, in an ideal world, they would be true, right? That you would remain a virgin, you would meet a man who honors that. But you know what's funny, actually, just off the top of my head before we close this out, that you're never really told that that man has kept himself, right? So the promise isn't that you will have a virgin husband. Now, I know that there are kind of evangelical, offshoots to Christianity, but let's just be honest. It's often gendered and indexed towards girls and women remaining virgins, and there are often consequences for girls. You rarely ever hear about a young man being unalived because he did not keep his honor, because he was seen sitting on a bench with a girl. That's not really how it works. And so actually the promise isn't really that you will get a virgin husband, right? That's not the promise. The promise is that you will get a husband, and it's usually just any old man, one that has not kept, okay, those ideals in his own life. So do not allow them to judge you. Do not allow them to question you. And also do not fall for the flattery. You know, I saw a video recently where a man who was not, he reverted or converted rather to Christianity. He was not a virgin himself, but the way he spoke about his wife, you know, who had kept herself, and then he gives advice to other young women about keeping, don't be drawn in by the fake flattery. Because, like I say, they give themselves license not to follow these supposed, golden moral rules, but they want to come and benefit from them. They want to benefit from them when you have kept the rules. The other thing I'll also say, because I think this one is really, really important for the women and the girls who maybe you have abstained, maybe you are still a virgin, for example, and you get to an age, it's usually maybe early 30s, mid 30s, and actually you meet somebody who appears to be your ideal man, a man of God, a Christian, or maybe he's not Christian, but he's doing and saying all the right things. That pipeline from long-term virginity, long-term abstinence to single mother is a very strong one, okay? Because you have to still use discernment. It's very easy, and we see it happening within a couple of years. A woman who was, abstaining or even celibate for a long time, self-confessed, maybe Christian, etc., bamboozled by a man, allows herself to lose her sense of self and discernment in the process also, and then but forth a few years later, divorced, left with maybe even a child. It's so important to keep your head screwed on regardless of your age, okay? You don't lose all discernment. And it's usually in that 30s range, for a number of reasons. Societal pressure, all of the things. Maybe you desire to be a mother. It is still important to keep your head screwed on straight. Okay, because a lot of the women who experience those things do express and share grief, regret afterwards. Okay, because actually it wasn't what they thought it was. And actually, when you listen very carefully, they believed that their virginity, that lifetime of purity, had some cachet with that man. And it did not. Okay, he may have been curious at first, found it a bit titillating, exciting. Like I say, it fans the flames of their ego, but it does not prevent them from being a human being. It doesn't prevent them from changing their mind. It doesn't prevent them from treating you the way they choose to treat you. And suddenly maybe you feel worthless, you feel like it's a waste, etc., etc. These are really important things. I think actually there aren't enough women actually who've actually lived a certain lifestyle who from the other side come back and tell you this is the real. Because quite frankly, systems of power, okay, and sometimes the people you're around, they need you to keep believing these myths about virginity and purity and what they actually mean when they don't have the meaning they ascribe to it. Like I say, it means something to you. It may even mean something for your faith, but you have to understand that it doesn't have the same meaning or value to other people. And if you're heterosexual, it doesn't have the same meaning or value to men. There are men who will, as I say, target you because they want to be your first. They may not even want to be your only because they may not have long-term plans for you. And so they will do and say the things that they think will win you over. And quite frankly, what you tend to find is when men meet women who have been virgins for, who are well into the adult years, for example, they absolutely know that the route they need to go is to convince you of marriage, of a long-term life, of it being serious, of you being special to them. They have to, because they can't come along and just tell you, I want to sleep with you. They can't come along and say, actually, I just want to have a go. They can't tell you that because the likelihood is, generally speaking, if you are remaining a virgin for a faith reason or a specific reason, maybe you do want to be married and that has been your intention and plan, you're not going to fall for that, right? So they have to work overtime. And one thing you have to realize about a lot of these men, just because they seem to be waiting to have sex with you, it doesn't mean they're waiting to have sex or they're not having sex with somebody else. Okay? You need to be clear on that because some of them will tell you, more than happy to wait. Yeah, I respect you. They'll even give off signs, indications that this would be a good practice for them too. But that does not mean that they're not having sex or even just wandering with other people during that time period that you think you're making them wait. Okay? You've got to be smarter. You've got to be smarter. Don't lose all your senses because that pipeline, like I say, is very short. I've seen it so many times. And there are plenty of examples of women online who share their stories. Okay. It's an invisible contract and it's actually a lie overall. Okay. The value that you ascribe to it, which you have the right to ascribe to it, it doesn't carry for everybody else. And if it really means something to you, although, as I say, I really wouldn't suggest you make it your personality or your identity because it's a construct anyway, just be wise. So that's what I thought I would share in answer to that direct question. And yeah, I will catch you soon. Do subscribe to the Substack. I talk about these kind of things in more detail on the Substack, so subscribe.